In my last video, I gave my answer to the first of 3 questions Nick Redding asked in his video on anti-fem praxis. What is feminism? I also said I'd answer the other 2. Where do non-feminist people stand? And what is to be done? This is partly because I began writing an answer to the 3rd question and realized I can't really answer that without the groundwork laid by answering the first 2. So here is my answer to the question, where do non-feminist people stand? Remember, I described feminism as a political movement designed to capitalize on society's naturally gynocentric outlook by gendering human rights issues to exclude men from consideration as human beings and women from any related obligation or accountability should they violate another person's human rights. In a nutshell, the politically targeted financial exploitation of society's tendency to favor and protect women, or in other words, a giant scam. Understanding where non-feminist people stand begins with understanding where feminists stand, because our place in society is directly influenced by theirs. Various organizations within the feminist movement have been perpetrating and perpetuating their scam for over a century. The entire time, they've had a powerful and devastating tool on their side: gynocentrism. Gynocentrism.com contains a comprehensive look at this phenomenon's causes and evolution. I'm not going to go into it deeply here, but I do recommend checking out that site because it contains a wealth of information that can be instrumental in discussing gender issues. The thing that is important to this topic is the nature and power of the concept itself. This concept is not a system of malicious authoritative power such as feminists attribute to their patriarchy boogeyman, but a natural tendency rooted, as described on gynocentrism.com, in a basic instinctual behavior inherited from our hominid ancestors for prioritizing female reproductive capacity. There's no conspiracy to it, or even conscious intent behind it. It's not a concept of morality or politics. It is an unconscious bias or attitude, one that directs how people view and respond to any human issue. In short, our civilization's moral measuring stick is, how does this affect women? This is not a result of feminist a priorism. Rather, it predates the movement, and feminism as it actually exists, not as feminists describe it, is founded on it. Feminist organizations have spent more than a century combining appeal to gynocentrism with written theory and public demonstration to establish feminist doctrine and leadership as the arbiters of women's interests. In doing so, these scam artists have positioned themselves as essentially the overseers of that moral measuring stick. They have used it to manipulate the public to the point where people are so averse to having compassion for men that they cannot see a thing as dysfunctional, abusive, or adverse unless they only look at its impact on women and girls. The moment you discuss a thing's bad impact on men and boys, rather than seeing the thing as universally bad, they interpret it as calling it not so bad, because the harm doesn't only affect women and girls. In some discussions, people literally interpret the condition of hurting men and boys as a factor that makes a thing that hurts women and girls okay, or in feminist speak, normalizes it. Feminists have also spent that time networking throughout the legislative, business, media, and educational arenas, insinuating themselves into Western nations' social and legal power systems in order to further cement their influence. The feminist movement today is not a counterculture. It is an integral part of the ruling establishment, with command of significant political and social power, and a deep and wide wellspring of funding. In terms of power and influence, the movement is the political equivalent of the giant R. malaria estoi colony that occupies 2,384 acres of Oregon, but with the root system of a quaking aspen colony. Their clout has extended to just about everything. Where does that leave the non-feminist? Well, we are the counterculture. We are outsiders, standing against a forceful tide, the underdog in every way, even though population-wise, we are the majority. That's the bad news. The good news is that this is changing, in part because second-wave feminists made the strategic mistake of extending their abusive power beyond the tolerance level of the uninvolved masses, and the third wave took that overextension to a ridiculous level. Online discussion among anti-feminists and men's rights activists led to increased public awareness of that abuse, particularly in family law and laws related to intimate partner and sexual violence, where anti-male discrimination is written into the law. Public controversy over Title IX in U.S. universities is another factor that has exposed feminism's corrupt influence, as more and more news stories emerge describing harm done to male students by these institutions' attempts to interpret and follow the law. Between seeing the impact of feminist-influenced law and policy such as that on their folks or themselves, watching the third wave's pageant of identity politic victim signaling, and encountering more and more publicly available responses to anti-male narratives, the average person is getting fed up with the feminist movement's shenanigans. The rise of men's issues discussion on social media exposed a wealth of information, including the gender demographics of the men's movement itself, which includes many women, demonstrating why feminism is not in fact the arbiter of women's interests. This was a big boost for non-feminist autonomy and the perception of non-feminism as a legitimate position. Another was the Gamergate controversy, the dynamics of which further cemented specifically non-feminist women's position in the gender issues discussion. That helped to demonstrate the illegitimacy of using gender as an argument against the opinions of non-feminist men, as non-feminist women refuse to have our sex used as a shield against criticism of misandric feminist assertions. And recently, Cassie Jay's documentary, The Red Pill, an examination of the men's rights movement, has expanded the discussion by forcing the issues and feminism's corruption out into the open. So right now, we stand in a better position than we've been in for about a century. Yes, there are significant obstacles to the success of any course of action non-feminists may take against organized feminism. If we seek legal or social reform, feminist presence within the political establishment is a barrier we have to confront. Another big hurdle is deeply held beliefs centered on measuring our society's morality by how well we prioritize women, and that obstacle is based on still another, society's overall gynocentric bias. And yes, that means some of the obstacles we face are deeply rooted in the human psyche. But these recent events and developments show that they are not insurmountable. Even more, they provide some guidance as to the answer to the third question: what is to be done? We know that for the time being, whatever is to be done, before it can be done, there must be a foundation on which to base it. We are not finished increasing public awareness. It is no longer the only thing that can immediately be done, but the need for it has not ended, especially since there's a concerted effort at quashing that awareness. We are not finished establishing a presence either, and for that we need a degree of unity, even if not all non-feminists have the same full spectrum of interests. To that end, it is important that we network with each other and gain an understanding of our common interests and goals. That continued increase in public awareness and understanding of the common goals upon which various non-feminist factions can agree will help determine what is to be done. I do have some thoughts on that, but that is a topic for another video.